The Mughals had a distinct concept of the expression of their sovereignty so far as the Zamindars are concerned. Today we shall see first this concept of sovereignty, and then we shall discuss the two other types of Zamindars, the middle Zamindars and the primary Zamindars. The Mughals were very keen to express their sovereign power so far as Zamindars are concerned. They have taken away often a portion of the Zamindari, converted into a state land, that is Khalsa. They have ousted the Zamindars for practically no reason at all, and they have installed new Zamindars on their own. This could be seen best in the question of the succession of the big Zamindars, even of primary and Mughal Zamindars as well. The whole Mughal concept of sovereignty is that the Mughal government appoints the Zamindar. Actually, in technical terms, without a Mughal sanad, one cannot call a person a Zamindar, whatever his rights and powers are. Now, in case of succession, each Zamindar, however big or small, has to take the approval of the imperial authority. But the problem is that the Mughals did not have any decided policy, any very clear policy of succession. There are innumerable examples of how it differs from one emperor to another. Even the same emperor has decided differently in two cases. I'll give you only two examples, otherwise it will be a too long story. Jahangir, for example, approved the succession of the eldest son of Bikaner. Shah Jahan, in case of Mewar, did not approve the succession of the eldest son and gave the approval to the youngest son. So therefore, there is no decided or a very clear-cut policy of the Mughals. They tried to show that it depends entirely on the will of the emperor, and although the succession is given as claimed, in certain cases this was not done. In case of Jodhpur, the problem had started in the reign of Aurangzeb, leading to war.
So the Mughals, insofar as the Zamindars were concerned, clearly expressed their sovereign authority and power in their kingdom. By their appointments and dismissals of the Zamindars, they communicated beyond any doubt that it is the Mughal emperors who made the final decision and not the Zamindars.
We now come to the middle Zamindars. Middle Zamindars, although they are Zamindars, are fundamentally different from the big Zamindars. As I have said earlier, that all the Zamindars in some sort of way were primary Zamindars as well. And because they are primary Zamindars, they have their land over their own Zamindari. But in case of the middle level Zamindars, their principal functions are two. One is to collect revenue from the primary Zamindars mostly, and then to keep law and order in the Zamindari areas. Now, these functions do not contain the Malikana rights, that is proprietorship rights, which the big Zamindars have or the primary Zamindars have. Therefore, these middle Zamindars are called Khidmat Guzari Zamindar, that is the service Zamindars. Their function is to collect revenue and keep law and order. But to the Mughal central government, these Zamindars are the pillars of the state, and they continue to give support to them because they considered them as one of the principal pillars of the Mughal administration. Among the middle Zamindars, we find one Zamindar called Chaudhuri. Chaudhuri is generally a leading Zamindar of the area, that is an influential Zamindar of the area. The post is hereditary. For the succession, it requires the imperial approval, and Chaudhuri is generally appointed for a pargana, where he collects the revenue and sends it either to a big Zamindar or directly to the treasury. Now, Chaudhuri later on, as we would see, became far more powerful, particularly during the end of the 18th century, when the central government was weakening and anarchy has started.
So far, we have dealt with the big Zamindars and the middle Zamindars and their functions in the Mughal Empire. Now let us examine the primary Zamindars.
The big Zamindar may also be a primary Zamindar in some area. For example, the Raja of Amber, he was the primary Zamindar in Amber area. But he is a big Zamindar. He had other lands from where to collect revenue and to administer law and order, even in some case justice. Now, the primary Zamindar has got the Malikana, that is, he has the right of the proprietorship of the land, and he collects the revenue from this area, submits it to the mid-level Zamindar or to the big Zamindar or to the treasury. If the government takes away this function, which the Mughal did in some cases, they always used to pay a portion of revenue as Malikana to the Zamindar. This process was called, as I have said earlier, Siri Hasil, or only Sir. Now, the difference between the Mughals and the British was, one of the differences I must say, was that the British did not pay the Siri Hasil when they took over the revenue collection of the Zamindar. So there was a certain social loss of the Zamindar itself, but there was certainly the economic loss of the Zamindar. Now, in Zamindari area, there were the people called Ijaradar. That is, Ijara is a contract, as I have said last time, for the collection of revenue according to the rules and regulations of the central government. The Zamindar may also be an Ijaradar in some other part. Actually, Ijaradari system, which started from Shah Jahan's time, grew more during the time of Aurangzeb. But then the Ijara was given mostly to the Zamindars on certain conditions. For example, I can give one example close at hand. The Raja Badwan then was not called Raja, merely a Zamindar. He got the title of the Raja at the later years of Aurangzeb. The Zamindar of Badwan, Krishnaram Rai, apart from his Zamindari, he was the Ijaradar of a certain area. He himself, in his turn, allotted Ijara to a portion of land in Mednapur to a Khatri called Sobha Singh. At the end of the 17th century, this Sobha Singh rebelled and he killed the Zamindar of Badwan by rebellion, on which there are plenty of legends as well. Now, this kind of Zamindar becoming a Jaradar was gradually becoming rarer in the early days of the 18th century. For example, in Bengal, during the time of Murshid Quli Khan, he became the Subadar in 1717 and died in 1727. He gave Ijara to certain merchants. We know their names. One of them was a Portuguese. Emperor Aurangzeb objected to Murshid Quli Khan's allotment of the Ijara, and we have his letter. But Murshid Quli convinced him, we have that letter also. Murshid Quli convinced him that he was merely doing it as it was done during the time of Shah Jahan, according to the Mughal rules and regulations. Whatever be the case, the Zamindars are becoming Ijaradars as well during mostly the later years of Aurangzeb's reign.
The Zamindari system, like any other political or economic systems, did not start all of a sudden. It had a slow evolution, perhaps even predating the Mughals. But the Zamindari system, as found during the Mughal period, started in northern India during the time of Akbar. It started in Bengal from 1583.
Now, in this period, that is from 1583 onwards, we see two features of the Zamindari system in Bengal. One is that there were earlier Zamindars. These Zamindars were generally approved by the Mughal government, although there is no very clear-cut evidence to that effect. But the second type of Zamindar, or second feature, is that some new settlements were being made, particularly in eastern Bengal in the coastal area. One of the reasons of such new settlements was that the Zamindars, particularly the Afghans, including 2 or 3 Hindus, after the Mughal conquest of North Bengal, had fled to eastern Bengal and had created their own Zamindaris. We have the contemporary Jesuit records from 1598 to almost up to 1605, giving us details of the settlements of these new Zamindaris in coastal areas, which are practically based on sugar, rice and cotton cultivation, with a very brisk trade not only within Bengal, not only within India, but also outside India. These Zamindaris, of course, are more or less independent, but these were absorbed by the Mughal government by 1630. We have a very detailed record given by Mirza Nathan, who was the admiral of the Mughals in Bengal at that time, in his book Baharistani-Gahebi, where he has given the Mughal policy towards these Zamindars. The Mughals developed 2 or 3 policies so far as these Zamindars are concerned. One is that those who had participated with the Mughals, had given money, had supplied soldiers, they were given back their Zamindaris. They were also made Mansabdars. This is one type of policy. The other type of policy is that those who had fought against the Mughals and were defeated. Pratapāditya of Jessore, for example, was one of them. Their Zamindaris were immediately taken by the Mughal government. A portion of it was made Khalisa first, and then this portion was given as Tankhwa Jaigir to other Mansabdars. But after some time, here in this case after about 9 years, the 2 sons of Pratap, he was dead by that time, 2 sons of Pratap were given back their primary Zamindari as maintenance. The third type is those who are merely asked to pay peshkash, that is tribute. They are not asked to fight, and the Mughals left them in peace.
So there were 3 types of Zamindars: those who collaborated with the Mughal emperors, those who rebelled, and the rest. The Mughals had clear policies with respect to each of these. Though they were harsh with the rebels, they relaxed it later.
We therefore in general find that in case of North India as well as in Bengal, there is a certain same framework so far as Zamindari is concerned. Professor B.R. Grover, in an article, had pointed out that this was the same framework that was prevalent in North India as well as in Bengal. Tapan Rai Chaudhuri, who had worked up to 1627, that is the death of Jahangir, stated that it is correct, but there are certain exceptions. So there are certain debates about whether it was the same framework or there are different frameworks, etc. But what Grover said, that generally the middle level Zamindars particularly were semi-official Zamindars. They do not have Malikana, it is true, but they are not transferred. They do not follow the Mughal revenue system within their Zamindari, and they have certain amount of independence. He calls these Zamindars as Ghair Amle Zamindars. The second type of Zamindar who followed the Mughal rules and regulations in their Zamindaris and pay revenue, yet remaining Zamindar with almost independence of action within his Zamindari, is called Amli Zamindar. The principal income of the Zamindar comes from a portion of the revenue, which he gets as non-kor. In case of big and primary Zamindars, it is Malikana, portion of the Malikana. In case of the middle level Zamindar, it is the service. remuneration for the service. Secondly, the Zamindar can impose taxes on the subjects, on his subjects, so to speak.
Though it was not permitted, the Zamindars imposed all kinds of taxes. There was a tax even on the bullocks, leave alone numerous taxes on goods within the territory and those brought from outside.
We know that there is the tax of rahadari, every kind of tax on every kind of goods passing through his Zamindari. The Mughal emperors tried to abolish some of these, but for example, Aurangzeb abolished. But as I've said earlier, Kafi Khan, the later historian, said that nobody paid any attention to such abolitions. Besides this, presents had to be given on the marriage of the Zamindar, on the marriage of his son, on the marriage of his daughter, birth and death in the family of the Zamindar, etc., in different festivals and so on and so forth. Zamindar also gives in return something. So in case of the Zamindar, he had certain rules and regulations certainly, but his authority within his Zamindari is practically unchallenged.
Besides the Zamindars, there was another category of nobles in the Mughal kingdom. They were known as the Talukdars. They were under the Zamindars in some cases and were appointed by the Zamindars to collect the revenue. But there were also Talukdars who were above the Zamindars and functioned quite independently.
Now, this taluk means connection. Abul Fazl has used this word. He used two words. He didn't use the word Zamindar. He used Talukdar and Bhumiya. Bhumiya he meant Zamindar. Talukdar also, it seems, he meant Zamindar. And he said that Odisha Talukdars are independent, which suggests that the Bengal Talukdars are not. In the mid-17th century, Shihabuddin Talish stated that the Talukdars in Bengal are under the Zamindars. But in Hyderabad as well as in Awadh, Talukdars are very important. They are over the Zamindars. They are the people who appoint the Zamindars who are lower than the Talukdars in Awadh and Hyderabad. Now, how Talukdar differs from the Zamindar? The principal difference in Bengal and perhaps in North India as well is that Talukdar doesn't have Malikana. He does not have the proprietary right. And therefore, if the Zamindar or the central government takes the revenue of his land, he may not get seed. The Mughals always used to give seed so that the social position of the person is not lowered. But technically, he is not authorized because he doesn't have a Malikana. But he gets a portion of the revenue as nankar, portion of the revenue collected. And that he considered his hawk. And therefore, when the central government or the big Zamindar takes it, he gets a portion as hawk, not Malikana.
Talukdars did not settle down as Talukdars. Many upgraded themselves as Zamindars. Of course, this required an imperial order.
The classic case is that of the English East India Company. The English East India Company in 1698 purchased 3 villages in Bengal, in the Pargana Aminabad. These 3 villages were Khalisa villages, that is Khalisa land. And therefore it required the permission of the Subadar, who was Ajimushin, then at that particular time. The Zamindars of the area, Subarna Chaudhuri and Manohar Datta as well as others, they refused to sell their land. But the Subedar Rajimusin, for reasons not very clear, forced them to sell at less than 3,000 rupees to the English. Now, in the sale document, sell and purchase document, the English were called very clearly Talukdar. They were authorized to pay the revenue directly to the central government. Of course, here in this case, provincial government. And in such a position, they are called Huzuri Talukdar, but they are not Zamindars. Many scholars, both English and Indian, had made this mistake. Even in 1717, in the Farman of Farrukhshire, Emperor Farrukhshire, given to the English East India Company of the right to purchase 38 villages, the Farman very clearly states that the company is a Talukdar, not a Zamindar. They became Zamindar after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, when it was recognized. After 1760, when they got 3 districts, they became Zamindarani Umda. So therefore, there are different types of Talukdars and Zamindars as well. By the end of the 18th century, the Zamindars as well as other officials have become very powerful. Kanungos have become Zamindars as well. Maharaja of Darbhanga became a Zamindar who was a Kanungo. The Zamindars increased their powers, etc. But that is another story. And that is the decline of the Mughal.